Welcome back. In the previous task, you learned how to summarize the data in the form of pivot tables and how to use the pivot table to create a line chart. In this task, you will create a column chart that shows the number of salespersons that fall within each of the percent progress categories. This chart could be very useful to get a better idea of the trend of whether salespersons are achieving the target set at the beginning of the year and how many fall behind that target and by how much. And speaking of trends, if we look at the line chart we created in the previous task that was showing the progress of the sales revenue for each quarter of the year for each division, we can see that two of the divisions, the North and the West, experienced a growth in sales throughout the year. The East division kind of stayed relatively stable, and the South division actually experienced a decline in sales from Q1 to Q4. Now, going back to the column chart that we will be creating, we'll start by creating a pivot table. So we'll go to the Sales Data 2 Workbook tab. And you can see that the entire table is already highlighted. So to add a new pivot table, you can just click Insert, Pivot Table, and we will again add the pivot table to a new worksheet. And now to organize these two new worksheets, we could call this one as Progress Categories and click OK. And we will call Sheet 1, we will rename this as Sales by Division and press OK. And we will go to the new worksheet that we have just created to make the pivot table. Now for this chart, we're relating the number of salespersons that fall within each of the progress categories. The different progress categories will be the columns of the table, so we'll place the category into the column section. And then since we just want to count how many salespersons fall within each category, you will place the salesperson category into the values section. And you can now see that for each of the categories, starting from 30 to 40%, 40 to 50, 50 to 60, and so on, we have how many salespersons fell within each category. And then we have over here to the left, the ones that achieved over 100% of the sales compared to their target. And now that we have the pivot table, we can create the chart. And for this chart, we're going to create a column chart instead of a line chart, since we're not really looking at a continuous progression as we did with the other chart. To create the chart, we will highlight the cells from cell A4 to cell I5. And again, we're omitting the grand total. Go to Insert, and here click on the column chart icon. And here we can see the chart that shows how many salespersons fell within each of the percent progress categories. Let's go ahead and close the pivot table menu, and we're going to extend this chart a little bit. So we're going to make it a little wider so that the different categories or the labels for the categories kind of fall under each of these columns. And as we did with the previous chart, we'll start formatting the chart by changing the chart title. So we'll go into chart title and change that to progress categories, or you could choose something like salespersons by progress categories. And then another formatting option that we have not yet seen is to have the actual value of the number of salespersons within each category listed above the actual column, instead of having to look at the vertical axis to determine the approximate value of the bar. And we can do this under the series section for each category. So for example, starting within the series of 100 plus, you can trigger that by first, where it says data labels, first deselecting this option and then selecting it again. And you can see that it has now triggered to show that there were 15 salespersons within this category. Stop the video and take a moment to do that with the remaining category. So you'll go into the second one, for example, deselect, and reselect, and come back when you're done. Great job! Well, now to finalize the formatting for this chart, we can remove the grid lines from the vertical axis so that they don't interfere with the labels we just added. The grid lines can be removed in the vertical axis menu, so we'll go into this menu, and down here where it says major grid lines, we will remove this option, and now you can see that the grid lines have been removed. Congratulations, you have successfully completed the course using conditional formatting, tables, and charts in Microsoft Excel. In this project, you have learned how to visually analyze data and identify trends using a variety of tools in Microsoft Excel. You have used conditional formatting to help you analyze data and highlight cells based on different rules. You have then used pivot tables to create summaries of the data that focuses on specific relationships, which you have then represented as a line chart and a column chart. Both conditional formatting and charts are two useful ways of visually analyzing data and exploring trends. Thank you very much for completing the project using conditional formatting, tables, and charts in Microsoft.